Good evening and welcome to tonight's Kenyon Review reading, Fall Fiction from the Kenyon Review with Marcela Fuentes, Bennett Sims, and Hanana Zaheer in conversation with Kenyon Review's Deputy Editor Elliot Holt. I am Elizabeth Dark, Associate Director of Programs for the Kenyon Review, and we are delighted that you have joined us this evening. Elliot will begin our program in just a moment, but first I will tend to a couple of details to help guide you through your time with us today. If you would like access to closed captioning for this evening, you may do so by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Also, if at any point you experience technical difficulties, our Kenyon Review associates Ocean Way and Kaya Case are keeping an eye on the chat and are ready to assist if you want to private message them there. They will also be posting helpful links into the chat throughout the evening, so keep your eyes open for those. And we will keep the chat open during the reading for your encouraging comments to our readers. And following the reading and Elliot's conversation with our guests, we'll take some time for questions, which you can ask indirectly by putting your question in the chat, or you can ask directly by clicking on the raise hand emoji or simply writing, "I have a question," in the chat. We will then call on you, at which point you can unmute yourself. As an audience member, we welcome you to keep your camera on during the reading to give our readers some friendly faces to look at. Or you may definitely turn it off if you'd like. Maybe you're finishing up dinner or moving around and you wish to not distract us with your surroundings. Regardless, though, please do keep yourself muted during our time together. And during the reading, we will spotlight the person speaking, but you will note that you have some viewing options to choose from in the top right corner of your screen. When we get to the Q&A portion of the evening, we will remove the spotlight, but you can continue to select Spotlight Speaker from your controls. And I believe that is all I have to share at this point, so I will pass it on to our Deputy Editor, Elliot Holt.
Ooh, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you all for joining us. I know that this is also the National Book Awards are happening tonight. So I hope that you all tune in to that after this event. Most of the awards won't actually be announced before 8 o'clock, so you're not going to miss anything by being here. But, you know, it's a big night for books. So as Elizabeth said, each of our three readers are fiction writers who have work in our fall issues of the Kenyon Review. They're each going to read for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to call them, announce them in alphabetical order. And then we'll have a brief conversation about their work and just about the joys and challenges of writing fiction in general. And then we'll open it up to some of your questions. So we're going to start with Marcela Fuentes. Marcela teaches writing at Texas A&M University. Her stories have been published in Indiana Review, the Rumpus, Ploughshares, and other journals. And she is at work on a novel about conjunto music. Am I pronouncing that right? Okay. Tonight, she's going to be reading from Skip Outs, which appeared in the September-October issue of the Kenyon Review. Marcela, take it away. I will mute myself.
Thank you all for having me, and just thank you everyone for attending. Let me just pull up my video. Okay. Here we go. So yeah, this is from the chapter called Skip Outs. My best friend Marina thinks it's dumb that I'm in a punk band. It's not our band style she has a problem with. It's that I'm wasting my time. She's mad that I gave up mathletes to practice punk songs in Felix's garage. According to Marina, my band is not serious. Actually, she says we aren't artistas. The way Marina says it, it counts more. A genius talent like Juan Gabriel or Selena. I'm just saying, what are you getting out of it? Marina said as we got to our English class. I heard this from her every morning lately, and it was getting on my nerves. I mean, look at Selena. Homegirl is putting in the work. Me and Art saw her 3 times last summer. Don't remind me, I said. I've never seen Selena, even though she regularly tours South Texas. I can't go to concerts, any concerts, because my dad doesn't want me out running the streets. My dad is super Mexicano. Unless I'm with a blood relative, eating at Applebee's after dark is out running the streets. The only reason I can practice with my band is that Felix lives in the condos a block from our high school. She's gonna be here again next month. Tell your dad you're sleeping over at my house. Maybe. Lulu, how are you even in a band and you can't get it together to see Selena? That's easy for you to say. I don't have 40 million married primas. When she wants to go out, Marina just tells her dad she's with her grown-up cousins. They always cover for her. Well, still, if you want something, you got to put the work in. Marina just wants me to see Selena with her. She doesn't care about my band. She's a lot like my dad. If it doesn't make money, what's the point? But Marina and I have been best friends since 5th grade. So instead of arguing with her, I took a position I knew she'd agree with. You're right, I have to see her. She's incredible. Truth, she said, and we skirted an argument. Selena Quintanilla is not just the truth. She is la pura verdad. I'm not even that into Tejano music, but I worship her. I have all her albums, know them all by heart. I've seen her on the Johnny Canales show. On stage, she was all rhythm and mesmerizing electricity in a black bustier and skin-tight Rocky Mountain jeans. It kills me that I've never seen her live, especially since I live right by the amphitheater. I sit in my room with the window open and listen every time Selena has a gig in town. Her voice soars so clear. I can hear her talk to the crowd, tease them, rile them up. I catch every word, every note, her breath between lyrics. Her voice is moody and capricious as the ocean. She keeps a note trembling on the edge of tears until I want to weep too. She drags the washing machine cumbia out of me, even though I'm not good at all. Devastates me when she sings mariachi with a dusky, full-throated banshee wail that vibratos my soul to pieces. If she sang in English, people would know her like they know Whitney Houston. Selena's not just an artista, she is a full-on diva. When she's 60 years old, she'll be Aretha Franklin legendary. But right now, Selena is a girl with a Mexican dad. He's her manager and he's the boss of everything. She's the queen of Tejano music, racking up Grammys, wearing rhinestone bras like she's Madonna, selling out huge shows in Mexico. And young and old, every man is in love with that traffic stopping nalga. But so what? She has a Mexican dad, just like Marina, just like me. Selena had to sneak around with her secret guitarist boyfriend because her dad wouldn't let her date. The scandal when her dad found out almost broke up Los Dinos. Her dad fired her boyfriend from the band and forbade her from ever seeing him again. Selena ended up running away and eloping. When the story came out, I said it was crazy. Imagine being married when you're only 20 years old. Marina said it was romantic. It's true love, she argued. They were meant to be. Anyway, Chris Bettis is super hot. Truth, I said, because I could agree with that. Even though she's the practical one, Marina does not get it. Selena's pinky nail has more talent than I ever will, but she's the proof that even if you are destined to take the world by storm, a Mexican dad is going to boss your life. I can't even imagine my dad meeting my bandmates, let alone being our band manager. I'd probably end up running away too, but not to get married. That's just another set of problems. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the voice. It's such a strong voice. Okay, next up we have Bennett Sims. Bennett is the author of the novel A Questionable Shape and the story collection White Dialogues. He teaches fiction at the University of Iowa. And tonight he will be reading from Unknown, a short story that appears in our November-December issue, which should be arriving in subscribers' mailboxes right now. Bennett.
Thank you, Elliot. Thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm just going to read the first scene from the story, which is called Unknown. At the mall, a woman asked to use his phone. "Excuse me," he heard from behind. He had just bought A's birthday gift, a new phone from the AT&T store. He was passing through the gauntlet of his way to the mall's exit, and he assumed that one of the stall's sales clerks was calling out to him, inviting him to sample cologne. He ignored the voice and kept walking, but the voice followed after. "Excuse me, sir. Sir, please, sir." When he turned, there was a small, older woman holding up a heavy purse in both hands. She thanked him and made eye contact. Trapped, he waited for her to ask for money. "May I borrow your phone?" she asked instead. "I need to make a call. It's an emergency." He hesitated. If it was an emergency, why was she asking a stranger? rather than a security guard or the clerk at the AT&T store. He felt certain it was a scam, but when he revolved the scenario in his mind, he couldn't make out what the nature of the scam would be. The worst she could do, it seemed, was take the phone and run, or fling it to the ground. "Please," she said, "it's important. I was supposed to call 5 minutes ago, and I'm already late. It's an emergency," she repeated, and she gestured vaguely in the direction of the AT&T store, where a young boy and girl were peering through the shop window. Neither turned to look back, and it wasn't clear whether they were with her or whether the emergency concerned them. He considered lying, claiming that his battery had died, but something in her gaze seemed to anticipate the lie, and he felt this path blocked by guilt. "It's no trouble," he told her. He took out his phone and tapped the passcode into the lock screen. He swiped open his settings and disabled Bluetooth, then opened his email and logged out. He handed her the phone. "Oh, thank you, sir." She held it in one hand while she dug through her purse with the other. From the bottom of her bag, she withdrew a second phone, a newer model, the same model, in fact, that he had just bought for A, not at all an inexpensive phone, and began tapping at it deftly. He felt instant alarm. He still didn't understand the scam or where the danger might lie, but he did not like the sight of this woman's phone. "Wait," he told her. "Why don't you make the call on your phone?" She was glancing from her screen to his, typing something. Without stopping or looking up, she answered, "I have no data. I need to find the number." All the politeness and gratitude had drained out of her voice. When she had finished typing, she smiled and stepped aside, holding his phone up to her ear. He told himself to remain calm. There were hundreds of witnesses around them. It wasn't as if she could run away with his phone. And even if it did, what did it matter? It was only a phone. He could go back to the store and buy a new phone. While waiting for her friend or whoever to answer, she hunched over, hugging her purse to her chest, in the posture of someone cramped into a phone booth. He maintained enough space between them to respect her privacy, but he was still close enough to eavesdrop, and when she finally spoke, he pretended to scan the crowd while straining his ears to listen. He could only pick out snatches. She was whispering angrily. "You'll never find me," he thought he heard her say. "Never." Her tone, though low, was vehement. She continued in this vein, her voice rarely rising above a murmur. Whoever was on the other end of the line must have been listening in complete silence, for there were no pauses in her monologue. She seemed to be gloating. "I escaped," he thought he heard her say, or "It's too late." "You'll just have to find someone else," he thought he heard her say. Finally, she hung up and handed him his phone. "Thank you so much, sir," she said. "You are my savior. Thank you." She walked off in the direction of the food court. He turned to the shop window, but the children were no longer there. Perhaps they were waiting in the food court to meet her, or maybe they had already left with their real mother. He opened the phone to check the recent calls. There were none. The last number dialed was A's from earlier that day. Either the woman had deleted her own call from the list, was this possible? Or she had not called anyone at all, had simply delivered her monologue to a dead phone. When he glanced back at the food court, the woman was gone. He couldn't find her anywhere in the crowd. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bennett. For more of why I think that story is so amazing, you can read, I wrote a little why we chose it mini essay in our newsletter. But that controlled, slow accumulation of dreadful detail is so good. Anyway, you have to read the rest of the story. Our final reader tonight is Hanana Zaheer, who is the author of Lovebirds, which was published by Bull City Press this year, 2021. Her writing has appeared or is forthcoming in Best Small Fictions 21, AGNI, Virginia Quarterly Review, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Southwest Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, Alaska Quarterly Review, with a notable mention in Best American Short Stories, and elsewhere. She is a fiction editor at Los Angeles Review and is currently working on a novel, but she is zooming in from my hometown of Washington, D.C. And she'll be reading tonight from The Good People of Lahore, a story that appears with Bennett's in our November-December issue. Hanana.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to read from this particular story, which was a fun one to write, but an interesting and different from how I typically write. So I'm really glad to be that it has space here at Kenyon Review. So I'm just going to read from a little bit of the beginning. The Good People of Lahore. The social chair of the ladies of the New Rule is on her sofa sipping wine and embroidering onto a pillowcase the group's emblem, tea roses circling a crown, when her husband arrives home earlier and more agitated than usual. Before she can ask him why the street is filled with flashing lights and why armed men are parked in vans every few houses, he tells her that he has had an idea for a picnic. Independence Day by the dam tomorrow. All senior officers, wives, and children leave the staff, he says. I've arranged for food and fireworks. You sort out the invites. Say it is to welcome the vice president and his wife. The social chair is new, both to marriage and to her social responsibilities. The suggestion throws her into a panic. She puts the pillowcase down, holds a pricked finger to her lip, and points her anxiety at her husband. Darling, she says, are you joking? The ladies would never go for it. It's so last minute. The Successful Wife's Handbook says the most critical element to hosting the right party is timing. Since it is the most important of the few big books she is allowed, and a wedding gift from the president's wife, the social chair has committed each instruction to memory. Events must not be in conflict with previous social or personal commitments for guests, she parrots. A gracious hostess thinks only of all others before herself. She dips her chin at the end, hoping that for once her husband will allow her the final word. I really can't. You'll have to learn some confidence in your position. He walks to the window and slides the bolt in and out of its holster. The social chair knew that moving into the gated government compound would come with unfamiliar responsibilities. What better price for being part of history, to be a champion of civil rights, reforming the government from the inside? But asserting herself with women already more established in the hierarchy is not something for which she's prepared. She tries again. It's midweek, darling, she says, looking at the soldiers who are lining up in front of her window, likely trampling her prized poppies. People have plans. The other wives have done this for a while, he says. They'll understand. She follows her husband around the living room as he moves from window to window, sliding bolts in place and turning the locks. We've already had parties welcoming the vice president and his wife, she says. I hosted one at our house a few weeks ago, remember? 2 weeks worth of phone calls and adding and removing people from the guest list, managing hurt feelings, catering to dietary preferences, all in the midst of workers and electricians who needed to ask where each wire would be nailed in and what windows were the most used, and the living room smelling of sweat as they installed the new security system that her husband is activating now. They tracked dirt all over the new Turkish carpet she had ordered from the recommended vendor on the back of the handbook. Cleaning up after them was exhausting. And then all those high heels in her garden. She and her imported 10,000 rupees a square meter Zosha grass have still not recovered. You're the one always asking for an outing. He knocks at the window and gives the men outside a thumbs up. Let's go away. I need a break from the city. Well, here's an outing. The handbook is very clear that the husband may have many important things on their minds and that the wife's job is to provide a calm and relaxing environment at home. But he has sent her on the last 2 trips to the mountains alone, making last-minute excuses about work. And the ladies have explained to her that most likely there's another woman involved. Why do you want me to leave? She asks. All of us, not just you, he says, and turns and dials someone on his phone. Yes, can you make sure to put someone on the roof of 12B? There's no security system installed. The social chair sticks her face against the window to see if there's any movement in 12B across the street. Her husband thinks that Misha, who lives there, is a little different from all the ladies in their circle. But the way he says this sounds like interest rooted under disapproval to her. He was the one who requested the president to let her keep her house after her husband was killed on his drive home. This was one of the things pointed out to the social chair on the phone earlier when the ladies decided to implement the boycott against Misha. I thought your job was enforcing the law, not protecting individual citizens. The social chair tries to keep the irritation from growing into complaint. You shouldn't be so suspicious, her husband says. It's not good for your health. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like that's a good example of, the sharper the target, the more successful satire is. I feel like you know exactly what your target is. So I have a kind of question for each of you, and then I'm going to open up for some questions for all of you. But Marcela, since you read first, Skip Outs is a novel excerpt. And so I'm curious to hear, when you started working on this project, did you know you were working on a novel, or like many of us, were you like, you thought you were doing a story and then you realized it wanted to be something longer?
Okay, so I thought I was working on a different novel.
Okay, see,
sorry, I think you're.
Oh, this is what happens. The work like tells us what it wants to be, and sometimes we're like, we don't want to listen for a long time, and then.
That's kind of, yeah, I guess that's kind of what happened. I thought I was working on a different novel, and then this little 14-year-old voice came to me and just was like, no, we're doing this. And so I just kind of let her run around on the page. It's been kind of fun just to kind of be in that space, which has not been for a while for me. I've been 14 for a long time.
So is the whole novel narrated in the same first person?
No, there are two voices. One of them is an adult third person. And so, but they connect, and these two characters connect, and things like that. And I think also just, I think for me, just like figuring out what she really wanted, what she really wants, and just, letting her do that thing. I don't know. I think it's been sometimes it's hard to write the X, or like to shape, let's say, like when I sent it to you guys, to shape it so that it seems self-contained and can be, published as that chapter. But yeah, it's been a, I guess, wild kind of thing. I really enjoyed it, but I'm ready to be done.
Are you almost done, or that's the worst question?
Yes, I'm like almost there. I'm just like wrapping up some revisions, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, that's it.
Well, we're also excited to read it.
Thank you. Oh, and I guess I should have said, probably it is no, I mean, probably you guys realize this, but it's the early 90s and Selena is still alive, right? Obviously not set today. So
yeah, I gathered that, but that is
okay. I was like, oh, I forgot to say that, but she's still alive in that one. All right. Thank you.
Bennett, could you talk to us a little bit about where the idea for this story came from? Like what your inspiration was initially?
Sure. I will quickly just acknowledge that I'm getting an unstable internet warning, and so if I freeze and glitch out, that's
no, but that's kind of fitting given that your story is about our technological. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, so the story draws from a few real encounters with phones I've had. I'll say, for those who haven't read it, that it's a story about essentially a haunted cell phone that, after the protagonist allows this woman to use a cell phone, he begins receiving a series of mysterious recordings of conversations that he and his partner are having in their apartment, that he becomes obsessed by. And I had a woman ask to use my phone in a mall, and I had the same sort of anxious thought spiral that the man did when I let her. I had robocalls with these like kind of anxiety dream, nightmarish voicemails being left on my phone 12 times a day. And so I was drawing from a lot of uncanny or creepy encounters with technology in my own life and trying to build an unstable narrator around them. And I was also, just in terms of inspiration, thinking about texts that in which new communications or new media technology sort of evert the unconscious of a protagonist. So like Robert Altman's movie Images, which begins with this unhappy wife receiving a strange phone call telling her that her husband is cheating on her, and it precipitates this downward spiral. or David Lynch's Lost Highway, where the character is given a phone by someone at a party and he says, "I'm in your house right now, call me," which precipitates another kind of paranoid and possessive and violent downward decline. So yeah, I just wanted the phone in this story to function as a kind of repository for the unconscious of this kind of jealous, possessive, anxious character, and to make things happen to him.
I think you succeeded. I'm going to say you succeeded. Oh, excellent. Hanana, I noticed you said on Twitter a couple of days ago, you said something like that The Good People of Lahore was a quote, important and different, felt important and different to write. Can you talk a little bit about what writing this story, how this felt important and different to you?
So just real quick before I say that, Bennett, I lived in Dubai for a while, and I actually have heard my own conversations while I was having them. They started repeating back to me. So very real in some parts of the world.
Yeah, that's happened to me too.
And very bizarre. Yeah. So this story really, I mean, so through my journey, I think as a writer, I was an immigrant to the US. I moved here at 17 as a refugee, like a political asylum. And a lot of my initial years here and of myself as a writer was trying to figure out what I was permitted to write and what I could write and what space I had to inhabit. So I wrote a lot of sort of white male protagonists because I guess that was power in some ways. But the traditions that I grew up, so I grew up under martial law in Pakistan, but my dad was in the army. So technically we were on the side of the martial law, if that makes sense. But there was a very heavy political element in the atmosphere. And I also belong to a smaller community in Pakistan, which is persecuted religiously. And when I say persecuted, I mean lynched and shot and, all that good stuff. So it was very difficult to sort of put all of that together, how individual sort of attachment to these bigger ideals translates into personal relationships and how people end up absorbing all these attitudes and then start treating each other, even if you're in the same circles or in the same space as outsiders. And so this was not, political things were not things I wanted to write about or that I was trying to write about, but slowly, this is, I think, the first big story, actually at Kenyon at Lee Abbott's workshop, where he had a prompt that I just sort of responded to. And that entire collection ended up playing into a little bit of this political world and a little bit of dystopian elements. And so I think for me, it was important because it helped me return to the kind of things I actually wanted to write about, as opposed to the things that I thought other people wanted to hear from me as an immigrant writer to the US.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I love that a prompt from the Kenyon Review Summer Writers Workshop, inspired you. That's really awesome to hear. But also, I love that you kind of use the domestic side as a way to sort of come at looking at military role. You're sort of telling it slant, right? And the kind of obsessiveness with social niceties and whatever in the midst of like what essentially feels like a coup about to happen I just think is a really smart angle on something. And one feels the urgency. I mean, it's amazing how when you write the thing that feels really urgent, like that's actually the thing that people want to read, right? You can feel the urgency. So brava. I'm so glad you wrote it. Okay, so I kind of warned you all that I was going to ask this question, but as you know, I'm a writer too. And I think we all have almost like literary family trees, like the writers that somehow shaped us or are kind of our ancestors. And I think sometimes as writers, you read something and you go, oh my God, you feel that sense of encountering someone who's doing the kind of thing that maybe you want to do or you've been trying to do. So I'm just curious to hear from all of you what, who are those writers for you? Who are some of the writers that have inspired you or influenced you or that you would sort of put yourself in lineage with? Bennett, do you want to start? Because, the reason I want to ask you, Bennett, is because it's funny, when I taught an undergraduate literature class at Brooklyn College once, that was a class on the stories of Hawthorne, Poe, and Kafka. And I could totally put your work in there with those guys, but I also know I want to hear about the other writers, because I can also see, I'm like, I could put you in there with DFW and Nicholson Baker. Let's hear about it.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. That's gratifying to hear. Yeah, I was sort of thinking about your question, and I do tend to think about influences on a project by project basis. Like when I'm working on a story or a novel, I'm thinking about the sentence traditions that I want to participate in. And normally I'm really drawn to novelists of consciousness who specialize in like neurotic monologues and obsessive thought spirals. And so the stylists I return to are like Nicholson Baker and David Foster Wallace, or Thomas Bernhard or Leah Davis. In this story in particular, I wanted to try, like I'm used to writing sort of long looping sentences, and I wanted to try to write something more muted and neutral. And so the stylist I was thinking a lot about is Brian Evanson, who's this great living horror writer who has this very minimalist style. So he'll describe scenes of really shocking violence or cosmic anomaly without heat, just with like cerebral, minimal, thin, rational sentences. And you can sort of feel in the coldness and control of the prose how much horror is being repressed. Like the horror isn't in the sentence itself. It's somewhere beneath the surface, or even beneath the psychology of the character who's experiencing it. And so yeah, I was thinking about his work a lot, which is work I return to and teach whenever I teach classes on horror fiction. But yeah, certainly Kafka accomplishes that as well, and it's like a huge touchstone for me as a horror precursor.
That makes that makes so much sense, because the kind of muted horror where it actually, you feel it more because of the sense of repression in the sentences. So that's fascinating. Marcela, what about you? Who's in your literary family tree?
I think a big one for me is Louise Erdrich. I love her so much. And I think for me, it's more about the way that she kind of has these sort of the webbing of family histories of a place, like the way that different generations within a community kind of the way things kind of change but stay the same, and that interesting way that people are interconnected, and also just like the family secrets that are revealed a lot of times in her work. Like somebody has a piece of it, somebody else has a different piece of it. And for me, that is so, I don't know, I'm really drawn to that, I think, particularly for this novel, because it does have a lot to do with history. And the section I read right now probably doesn't have that kind of feel, but definitely has that kind of, someone has a piece of this information and someone else, is related, but no one knows, and whatever, like that kind of just the web of history that she's so good at, and that she revisits a lot. I think even some of her more recent work, you can see characters from past novels kind of popping up, and I really love her. I also really like Juan Rulfo, who is a Mexican writer, and I'm drawn to his work also because he writes kind of similar to what Bennett is saying, like kind of write some really violent things and just kind of say it very matter-of-factly, very, like, oh yeah, that happened and stuff like that. And so those are two people that I really, really like and admire.
Cool. Hanana, what about you?
So I think I also am attracted to violence that's stated plainly. I just don't know what that is about it, but I think there's something beautiful about a simple rendition to a very complicated idea. And I think for me, influences are also sort of at the time. So like right now, for example, a couple of the writers that I've been reading and kind of, so how I measure influence is when I'm reading them and then I have to put it down because I have to go write something immediately. I cannot finish the sentence, or I cannot finish the page. And so for me, that right now is Yoko Ogawa, who's a Japanese writer, and she has this brilliant collection, Revenge, which it's so delicate and so dark.
So good.
So good. That I find myself, every time I read that, I find myself sort of in the right headspace. The other one that I'm really interested in right now is Sayaka Murata, who's written this novel called Earthlings, which gets like more and more bizarre. It's so straightforward and it's such clean writing, but then the farther deeper we get into it, it gets bizarre. And yet it's, you just kind of follow along. So those are kind of, and then there's this other writer I've been recently introduced to. It's a Bengali writer called Masiul Islam, and he has this one story called A Meat Market. And this is sort of the story that I wish I had written, the one that I envy the most. But again, it's like a super dark story about this guy who's going to buy meat for a festival for Eid and ends up, why I shouldn't ruin it. Yeah, but I would recommend looking it up. It's
Will
dark.
you put the name of that last writer in the chat?
Sure,
Because I have not read him before and I want to make sure I can look him up later.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just feel like I had all these other influences that I, again, was told I should have. And I think I'm at the point where I'm returning to what I grew up with and the writers that I heard about growing up. So like Manto, he was a big Pakistani short story writer with some brilliant dark work, dark and very social commentary oriented work. So I'm kind of just returning to all of that right now.
Dark is good.
Dark
is really good.
Dark is delicious. Yeah.
I know. I like dark. That's okay. This is so great. So I have another quick question for you, which is because, there are those moments when you're really in the zone and everything, you're just really in it inside a story you're working on. And then of course there are the times when it's the opposite of that, when it's just like a total struggle. So I'm curious if you'd all be willing to open up a little bit about maybe what parts of the things that we've published were the hardest to write, or where you felt, like, oh my God, this is never going to work. What about you, Bennett? Because it's so easy when it's done and you send it off, it just feels so whatever, but we're dying to hear, like, I love hearing the hard parts.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, for me, I tend to write riffs and fragments, and then the hard part is finding a form or synthesizing a form that can contain them. And so my Word documents are just sort of like upset puzzle boxes where the pieces need to be fit together. And that process can take years. And so the difficulty is just sitting with a passage that I like enough to try to build a container for, and figure out what the transitions are going to be and what the narrative structure will be for it. This story was a little different because I was just approaching the prose differently, and it's much more linear and driven by narrative and event. And so the hard parts of this were not knowing what would happen next, like getting a little momentum, having something creepy happen with this guy's phone, and then setting it down and not knowing how he would react to it or how it would affect his relationship, which sort of explodes over the course of the story. So yeah, I would hit narrative walls with this, but I wrote it more or less from beginning to end, which is unusual for me. It wasn't a piece that I had to arrange a bunch of fragments around for.
I love that you said it's like a puzzle piece. I do tend to think of fiction as kind of architectural, like it's like a spaces you're building. Like to me, it's very much like rooms you're sort of, so that makes a lot of sense to me. What about you, Marcela?
I think it often depends on what I'm writing. I've certainly written stories that I sat down and was like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Just, but I think a lot of times I feel that I'm similar to Bennett in that I will write some bit and then I'll just, okay, let me put that here. And maybe there'll be another bit and then I have to kind of arrange them. The piece that's in the Kenyon Review though, is one that I pretty much knew like that the narrative was going to go the way it was, because it was sort of, they're skipping out of school. So like, it was much easier to be like, oh, they're going to go do whatever things, because they're going to go do this thing. So, but other times I do feel like I kind of like marinate in a moment and then decide whether that moment's going to make it into the story. So, yeah.
Got it. Hanana, what about you?
I'm a very impatient writer. So often I have these brilliant ideas. I mean, I joke about this, but I feel like I start every story saying, this is my New Yorker story. And then, I have these grand ambitions for it. And I kind of have this like grand plan. I want to write everything down very quickly. Life often does not afford you that flexibility, I've learned. Plus I have children, et cetera, et cetera. So I find myself kind of writing a lot in my head. And then so when I come to the page, by that time, I figured out certain complications, or I figured out certain, base conflicts. So then the thing that I struggle with the most is rushing through it in a way that's not overwritten. Because I think, like a lot of writers, I love revision when I actually get to it. But the process of getting from draft to revision, I'm very reluctant. Like I'm like that toddler who's screaming and crying. It's like, don't make me do it. And then when I get there, I'm like, oh, okay, this is brilliant. I love it. But so that process is difficult for me. And often, I mean, with this story particularly, I knew what was going to happen. I thought about it a lot in my head. I talked about it with a friend. I knew how it was going to go, but getting the language down and getting it clean took me, I want to say, a good few months. Like I was very resistant to not being flowery or over dramatic with it, just because I thought, okay, I'm writing about serious things, so perhaps it needs to be a bit more serious. But yeah.
A few months is fast. Are you kidding? I feel like that's really fast. I've spent years on single stories. Like, but you know what's funny is I do think most fiction writers that I know fall into one of two categories. The people who just have to get down a whole messy draft, like they'll just write a whole novel draft in like one whatever. And I wish I were one of those people who could just like get a whole messy draft down without. And then there are those of us who are sort of painstakingly piecing together like small incremental sentences and sort of revising as we go. And I'm convinced, and I'm definitely one of that second kind of person. I'm not sure that second kind of person, it's really hard to do a novel that way, because it's like, that's a kind of perfectionism that is suited to stories. But it sounds like maybe you're more of the former, where you can kind of get a draft down and then.
No, I'm a weird combination of a super perfectionist, very hard on myself, and very impatient. It's so any of my writer support group are very frustrated with me at any given time, because I both want this excellence and I want it super fast. I am working on a novel though, so it's forcing me to learn my lesson and kind of, realize that writing's a slower game than just sort of spitting out short stories. So
I mean, it is slow, but I do think everyone's process is really different. And that's why I'm just sort of curious to hear about it. Because I know, for example, my friend Lauren Groff, her process, she will just write a whole draft by hand of a novel, throw it away, start again, rewriting by hand, figuring anything that was in the first draft that was good is going to kind of rise to the top and come out again in the second handwritten draft. And then throw it away. Like she doesn't even get to typing like she just keeps doing the messy drafts, complete multiple messy drafts. And it's amazing.
you can say by hand?
Yeah, by hand. She doesn't even type until maybe draft 3 or 4. But anyway, it's extraordinary. It's incredibly labor intensive, but also that's just her process. And I am like, no, I'm still tinkering with this one sentence. Anyway, and maybe Bennett, you're more like a tinkerer.
Yeah, I'm a tinkerer. I wish I could. I'm a tinkerer and a typer. I envy people who write by hand. Although I did just have a fantasy of typing out a full first draft of a novel and then throwing my laptop away and then buying a new laptop and typing out the second draft.
I mean, sure.
Method.
Like with just, yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah. Marcela, are you a writer by hand do you draft by hand?
Sometimes, not that often, unless it's a short story. Like I would never draft my novel by hand. Also, I'm so, I don't know. I think if I put it on a page, I'd probably lose it. So I have to have everything kind of in my computer or it will be lost. So yeah, I don't really draft by hand unless I'm having writer's block. Like if I
Mhm.
really can't get back into something, then yes, I'm like, okay, we're gonna do it by hand, and then it will kind of start working. But then as soon as it does, I'm like, okay, we're going back to the computer.
But I do think that a lot of writing is just tricking yourself into overcoming your own weird doubts and anxieties. Like you have to figure out what it is. And so, for some people, writing by hand is a way to kind of tell themselves, it's okay. I don't have to commit to this. It's not, I have room to play, whereas when it's, in a Word document, it suddenly feels for some people harder to change or, yeah, I find that I
less
would
likely to check social media while you're writing if you're doing it by hand.
There's that too. But I mean, I do think it's like mind games. Yeah. We figure out how we can trick ourselves. I find that I will sometimes compose by hand just to kind of find my way into the voice. And when it's like a gear, like I feel like I'm tuning a dial, I'm trying to find the register. And when I find the register, then I'm like, oh, now I can start typing because I'm in the right place. But I don't know. It's such I think the process is really different for everyone. So I like hearing about it because I think we are all very, you just figure out what works for you. Yeah. Hanana asks, is it related to voice for you? I would love to hear from all of you because I love what you were saying, Bennett, about for you, what the paramount thing is kind of the sentence patterns you want to participate in. But yeah, I'd love to hear, I think we all have different impulses. Maybe for some of us, it's about the sentence patterns and some of it's the voice and some of it is tone. So any of you jump in. What do you feel like that the thing you're looking for is?
I think for me, it is voice. It really is like who is speaking right now, who is, and for me, that's the first thing. And then I'll deal with the sentences after. I feel like I might be that messy writer.
Yeah, same. I feel like once I know the attitude of the story, or like what is it serious? Is it serious with a little like haha? Is it like what's the
Tone. So you're like all about tone.
I am, yeah, tone and the voice. I feel like it's a little, so it's funny. I used to improvise on stage. So I feel like I'm very trained to the immediate jump into what the character's presentation is. And I feel like once that's a difficult thing to figure out, but once I figured that out, then it's easier for me to write it. I now that I'm thinking about it, I do struggle with stories more until the point where that happens.
But also the great improv rule is yes and, right? Where you're like, I just
accept it all, just take it all. Yeah.
Yes, so you just have to keep yes anding your way through your draft, like maybe not edit yourself too much as you go. Well, I think, I have no other questions. Maybe we should open it up to our audience questions. I'm sure our interns have some questions.
Yeah, I will remind the audience that this is your chance to join the conversation that's been taking place by either raising your hand and we can call on you and unmute you for you to ask your question, or you can put the question in the chat and we will ask it for you. But we also, while we wait for you, we have questions. The KR associates, Kaya and Ocean, have prepared some questions. And I actually, I see one from Matt. This is great. I'm going to start with Matt's after I ask mine. And mine's actually for Elliot, because we have Kenyon Review readers in our audience. We have people who are writers and submit. And so, Elliot, I was hoping you could speak to kind of the specifics of what led to these stories being ultimately published in the KR, but then also generally what makes a KR piece or a piece submitted to the KR rise to the top of the 10,000 plus submission pile.
Yeah, I think as a reader, and I think this is true of most of our editors, are, Catholic with a lowercase c readers, in the sense that I happen to respond to a lot of different things as long as it's kind of working on its terms, right? And what I mean by that is I think within usually the first sentence, you have a sense of what the intention of the work is or what it's sort of trying to do. And so then I as a reader, I'm just kind of like, well, what does this thing try to do? And then is it kind of succeeding on those terms? And I am also, as a reader, always excited when I read something that feels like a really strong and original voice. You know, you can, like in Marcela's, in Skip Outs, you can really hear the voice. There's a real sense of that this is like the sound of a person talking. It's really voicey. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of crackle. I use the word crackle a lot because I really like to kind of hear the pop. In Bennett's story, when I read that, the other thing I want to say as a reader, I'm always looking for both a sense of control, but not a sense of overdetermination. And what I mean by that is the sense that the writer hasn't so overdetermined what I, as a reader, am going to experience that there's no sense of kind of surprise or the work isn't like living. But at the same time, you do want to feel that sort of sense of control and authority. And like, Bennett's story is a great example of just like, oh my God, there's so much authority from like the first sentence that I was just like, okay, I'm here, I'm going, I'm following this, and got kind of increasingly creeped out in the best way. And Hanana's story, there's so much urgency, it's always so really thrilling to read something that feels like it has something really to say, so I don't know if that's really helpful, because I'm in all three of your things, I was responding to different things, but I guess what I'm saying is I think all of your work is working on its terms. And also not boring. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but like, I don't want to be bored. I don't want to read, there's a lot of stuff that feels very familiar. It's kind of well made, but sort of familiar. And it's very exciting to read work that is, defamiliarized in some way, either in terms of character or premise or language, or ideally all the above. Is that helpful?
It is. I've heard you use the word crackle before. I think that's such a good way to
describe. I love crackle.
Mm-hmm.
I just desperately want crackle, but yeah.
Matt had a question.
How has the pandemic affected your productivity, negative, positive, or otherwise?
In the beginning of the pandemic, it was wildly amazing. I was very productive because all of a sudden the world was shut down. I had zero obligations. Nobody could ask me for anything. I owed nobody anything. And so it was just my time and me. So it was wonderful. I finished a chapbook, actually, the one that got published earlier this year. So that was great. I finished a collection of stories, which was great. But recently, I think now continuing to be still in the pandemic, I feel like now it's gotten to the point where, like, as you may have guessed from my revision answer as well, like I go full steam and then I peter out a little bit. So I think, now I'm kind of in that I need a little fuel to chug forward.
You're languishing. We're all languishing. It's such a good word, though. We're all languishing.
That's a beautiful way to put what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like I was the opposite. When it first happened, it was just a lot of upheaval. My husband moved. He usually would work in a different town, like another couple hours away, and he'd come home on the weekends. But during the pandemic, they were like, okay, we're going to move home. So he moved in. It was all this move in. My son was totally, I don't know, a teenager who's like really sad about not seeing his friends and whatever. I feel like that was really hard to put it all away and then, work. But I feel like as it went on, it was the opposite for me. As it went on, I was like, you know what? I don't care. Y'all, you know what? Walk it off, whatever. Mom's working. So I feel like I was really more productive, or have been, in the latter half of it, rather than like when it first happened. And of course, like the anxiety, right? You're just like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. Like, okay. Also, I live in Texas where everyone's like, we're not gonna wear a mask because it's tyranny. I'm like, oh God. So it was a lot of like stressful things. But I think now that, I guess I've gotten used to it, I feel like I've been much more productive towards the end of it than at the beginning. So anyway.
No, but this is like the whole capitalist thing, right? Where we're measuring everything about productivity. I'm like, part of me wants to be like, why are we even worried about how productive we are? But Bennett, let's hear down with capitalism.
But yeah, I was gonna comment on that. I think that one of the things it feels kind of ghoulish to describe it in these terms. One of the things I've enjoyed about the pandemic or about the shift to Zoom is less its impact on my writing life than on my peripheral professional life. Like, I didn't mind like able to teach in sweatpants and close the laptop if the class went poorly and go lie down rather than walk home for an hour replaying all the dumb things I said in my head. I like being able to go to readings on Zoom. I assume many of the people listening to this are washing dishes and cooking their dinners, and it's great that they can do that and they don't have to hoof it to a bookstore for this, as nice as it would be to see everyone in person. So all of that was kind of a revelation for me. The writing itself is sort of the same as it always is for me, which is just like being really depressed and stuck in front of my laptop for months at a time and like banging my head against stuff. And it began to feel a little bit like being at a residency, because people's approach to the pandemic was like, so-and-so wrote a novel and had a kid during the pandemic. What did you accomplish? And it was like I was living in this post-apocalyptic Yaddo world where—
oh my God, that is so true. Because you guys, I'm sure you've all been to residencies. Like, I've been to Yaddo and McDowell, and there's that terrible feeling like, you've been there a few weeks and someone else is like, I just realized I've written 60,000 words. And you're just like, I'm a total failure. How have you already written 60? And there's that sense of like, am I getting enough done? Like so yes, it's totally true. And someone else is like, I just finished my second book. And I'm like, you're right. I just banged my head against the wall 7 times today.
Those are curated lives, okay? You're not getting the full story, just that
right.
little.
But also, again, we're all different kinds of workers, right? So some people really are getting out a whole messy draft, and anyway, it's really funny. It is like a residency that we're like, I didn't use the time well enough. Now I have to go home. What other questions do people have?
Kaya, did you have a question?
Sure, yeah. All right, I'll begin with one for Marcela, though I think it kind of applies to everybody. So much like Elliot, I really enjoyed the specificity of your narrator's voice, kind of in terms of everything from like age to culture to just like personality. And you mentioned that voice is really key to your practice, but can you expand upon the process of how you select who is going to tell and really kind of drive a given story, and like how you go about inhabiting that particular character?
I think, well, first of all, I don't sit down and decide, oh, I'm going to write a 14-year-old. I don't sit down and think, or I'm going to write a suburban whatever. Like, I don't really do that. But I do feel like I think it's like whatever, this sounds like very fluffy, but I think it's like whatever is trying to speak to you at the time. And for me, with this part of the novel, or with this narrator, a lot of what is trying to was coming out for me is kind of exploring the idea of conjunto music, particularly that style that was very popular in Texas in the 90s, that pretty much stopped being popular when Selena got murdered. Not that they didn't like it after that, but it just really was a dampener on the whole thing. And the idea that like this teenager would really enjoy being in a punk band, but also love Selena so much, like somehow like, oh, that's okay because she's Selena, it doesn't matter. And I think that that voice came to me from that place. Also, I think being influenced by different, in life, things influence you. I have a very good friend who he's a great guy. He's a postman. Okay. He's like a mailman. Right. But we get together sometimes. He's a very old friend. And sometimes we'll all get together and he's, we're all talking and people will talk about their accomplishments. And he sits there and he's like, my band opened for Selena. And we're like, okay, you know what? We're about going home. Shut up. And so just like thinking about like, what it would be like to be a high schooler if you're like in high school and your band literally opened for Selena and you're like, what the heck, you know? So just like, I guess this is a roundabout way of saying things that I'm interested in, preoccupied by, and then also just bits out of life that you kind of think about that and wonder about it, and just suddenly you're on the page. So.
Ocean, do you have a question?
Sure. A lot of my questions actually have been covered. I was going to ask a question about voice as well, but I'll ask a more vague question. I really admire, like for all of you, I really admire how your work built like slowly through dialogue and description, and how you convey so much information about like the time and place. So could you talk a little bit about like how you weave the information or like research into the story, and how do you like create the atmosphere through details? Thank you.
Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I did this so much with this story, but one of the things that's always in my mind is actually from Lee Abbott's workshop at Kenyon. And he had this rule of threes.
Someone want to drop the link to apply to the Kenyon Review Summer Workshops?
Somebody
Hanana is doing a really, Hanana, I just want to say, we did not pay her to say this.
No, it just.
Okay, thank you though. This is great.
No, it truly was. I mean, my collection did start there. So I actually have really, really fond memories of my summer over there. But the thing is, like, it's one of those moments when you take some workshops, and like most of them at this point, I feel like are just whatever, like you're there because you want a company and you want the company of other writers. But with Lee's workshop, I felt like my writing changed in a significant way, because he had this rule of threes, which he said, he was like, you got to be able to look at your writing on a page and no more than 3 sentences in either dialogue or exposition or explanation of something. So when you're moving forward, I don't always follow the rule, but it's a good thing to have in the back of my head, because it forces you to keep moving this. When I teach students, that's one of the things I use, because it forces you to keep moving the story forward, as opposed to just getting stuck in a back and forth in dialogue, or just getting stuck in a lot of exposition where, you're just tempted to sit there and kind of explain the whole situation. So it keeps you going.
Right. I mean, I think you're right. Like beginning emerging writers, beginning writers often struggle with that balance between scene and summary. Right. And so, I happen to believe that for every role there's a way to break it. Like, it's all like, you can do whatever you want as long as you do it well. But I think you're right that it's helpful to start thinking about, where's the scene, where's the summary, how are they?
Yeah, just like a balance. I mean, I lean heavily to exposition. I think maybe this is like a Pakistani side of me, because a lot of our storytelling is expository.
Telling.
Yeah, and omniscient narration, and very sort of like.
But it is, but like, first of all, this whole show don't tell thing is a bunch of nonsense, because all good fiction does both. But also, like Ian Lee always says, she's like, we don't call it story showing, we call it storytelling. So of course there's telling in there, right? Yeah, it's just about making that telling vivid.
Right, exactly. I'm not sure that answered the question at all, but sorry, Ocean, but that's all I got.
But I will say, Ocean, I think I like that you use the word details, because I think most great fiction, all great fiction really, it's about specificity, right? Not generality. And these are all really good examples of very specific details, bringing these settings and people and situations to life. So it's Flaubert, right, who said, put slippers on shop clerks. I'm just going to drop a bunch of, literary nonsense tonight. But yes, details, it's all about texture. I always say, this is something I actually made this up, but I'm always looking for prose that has what I call a hide thread count. And what I mean by that is, well, I think you know what I mean by that, right? Like, how like really cheap sheets, it's just like feels sort of flat, but I always want this sense that there's like lots of layers and texture and thickness. Yeah. And so sometimes I read a story where I'm like, oh, it just feels a little thin. Like it's not, rich enough. It doesn't feel lived in enough. You don't want to kind of sink into it. And that quality of thread count, it has nothing to do with the sentence style. You know, it doesn't, I'm not saying it has to be long, ornate sentences. It's not about whether it's hot or cool prose, but it's about texture. And so, you know, you all have high thread count fiction, high thread count prose.
Indeed, for sure. Kaya has
Maybe
another
that's a
question.
good note. Oh no, Kaya, ask away.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of, so we've had a lot of questions around like craft. So this is similar to that, but specifically Bennett, when you were reading, I was just really impressed by the restraint you're kind of able to hold over that first section of Unknown and the quiet tension there. So can you speak to how you strike that kind of difficult balance, I think, between just enough information to establish that kind of ambiguous tension, but not enough to spoil it? Or maybe everyone could just talk about how they work on kind of pacing out the story.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I was thinking about Ocean's question and thinking that I would answer it sort of from the opposite direction, which I guess is getting at what you're asking about, because my story actually doesn't have a lot of local detail or scene staging of the setting. Like, it doesn't name what city it takes place in. The characters don't have names. The partner is only known as the initial, and the protagonist is only known as he, or the other character is the woman. There are a few very lightly sketched settings, like a shopping mall, an apartment, a workplace, a car, but very little detail about those settings. And yeah, the only true proper name in the story is the AT&T store. You get this corporate logo floating in an otherwise kind of white space, like the story could happen anywhere. And I think that, yeah, it was a sort of conscious decision to scale back the level of detail in order to achieve a kind of tension and focus for the protagonist. So the protagonist is in a state of anxiety in that first scene particularly, and so the kinds of things he's noticing are pretty skeletal. Like, he's noticing that there's a strange woman, there's a security guard, there are these two children, and his consciousness is sort of zoned in on those points of tension, and he's not giving a lot of attention to the scenery of his surroundings. And so, yeah, I did scale back the level of detail for the setting, for this piece in particular, as hopefully as a way of achieving the kind of tension you were describing in your question, or achieving the kind of focus or forward movement.
Someone asked, where did high thread count? Just to be clear, that is a term I made up a few years ago. It's something I tell my students all the time. And I don't know, some people have quoted it back to me. They're like, remember when you talked about high thread count? And I'm like, yeah. But I'm pretty sure I just made it up, but now I'm just going to stick by it. So maybe I'll write a craft essay about it for someone. But yes, I know, Bennett, you talked about, I love work that is essentially about unspooling consciousness on the page. And so what I love about your story is you're right that the setting is this kind of white space and really vague, but the precision and the texture of just the consciousness unraveling is like so good. Any other questions?
I'm going to end us with a prompt, which is extremely intimidating since Lee K. Abbott has been mentioned tonight. But we've been extending prompts to the audience this semester, as it is an audience of writers. And the prompt comes from various things that you all said and read throughout the evening. So I don't know why I got stuck on, Marcela, your mention of family histories. I think it's because we're about to enter this period of, generally at some point in the next couple of months, we hang out with family if we're able. So the prompt is to select or create, this is fiction, a family secret that involves plainly stated violence. Hanana, that was your was a statement you made that I really liked in kind of talking about the way Bennett used language. But then the way you enter this fragment or this scene or this passage is through an obsessive thought spiral. So again, this is a family.
So take it away with you. This is not like you have to write this.
No, don't submit them. I mean, maybe if it becomes something, we'll read them one day, but no, this is just for your own, enjoyment. A family secret that involves plainly stated violence, and you enter this through an obsessive thought spiral.
Right. And of course, the language itself will probably become obsessive
Yes.
thought spiral, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's going to keep everyone busy for the next however long.
But I appreciate you all. Thank you, Hanana and Bennett and Marcela, for joining us. Thank you, Elliot, for leading the discussion and for pulling all of this together. And thank you, Ocean and Kaya, for joining us and helping us with the tech side as well as the questions. And thank you, audience, for joining us for this conversation as well.
And now go watch the National Book Awards.
Yes.
Which you can watch, they're virtual this year, so you can watch them on YouTube. Some of you I will see tomorrow. I think I'm going to see some of my Kenyan students tomorrow. But this was a pleasure. Bennett, Marcela, Hanana, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you, Kaya and Ocean. And thank you all for coming. And also, if you're not a subscriber to the Kenyan Review, please subscribe, because, magazines like us need subscribers to stay around. So this is my plea to you to subscribe.
And if you enjoyed tonight, please join us again on November 7th. We're going to have a fall poetry reading with Richie Hoffman, Linda Gregerson, and Rajiv Mohabir. And that's going to be led by Nicole Dutton. So
yes,
love to see you.
Chief. Anyway, thank you. This was a real pleasure. I love talking to other writers. Okay, bye y'all.
Have a good night.